4:07 a.m. The Arabian Sea, 211 miles southwest of Karachi. The ocean at this hour is a featureless black plain stretching to every horizon, interrupted only by the white wake of USS Carl Vinson, cutting northwest at 24 knots, and the running lights of the escort vessels arranged around her in the concentric rings of a carrier strike group at sea. No moon, no cloud cover, brilliant stars, and below that brilliant sky, on a sea that was as flat and dark as polished obsidian, the most powerful naval force assembled in the Arabian Sea in 2 decades was conducting routine flight operations, aircraft cycling on and off the deck in standard rotation, the night watch maintaining its patrols, the Combat Information Center tracking every contact within 200 miles with the calm, continuous attention that Aegis never abandons. What the watch and the CIC did not yet know. What no one in the strike group had been told, because the intelligence had been compartmented at the highest classification level and had only been fully assessed 6 hours earlier, was that the exercises were not exercises. For 11 days, a combined Chinese and Iranian naval task force had been conducting what both governments had publicly described as a routine joint maritime exercise in the northern Arabian Sea. China's contribution: the guided missile destroyer CNS Urumqi, the guided missile frigate CNS Jiangtan, and the replenishment vessel RFAHU Chaganhu. Iran's contribution: 3 IRGC frigate-class vessels and 4 fast patrol craft. 7 vessels total, operating in a coordinated formation that had been maneuvering through a series of announced exercise scenarios. Anti-submarine warfare drills, surface warfare exercises, and damage control training. In an area of the northern Arabian Sea that was, by any calculation of nautical geometry, uncomfortably close to USS Carl Vinson's operating area. The public exercises were a shell. Their actual purpose was positioning. In a joint operation that had been developed over 19 months in coordinated planning sessions between the PLA Navy's Western Theater Command and the IRGC Naval Command, the two forces had designed an attack package of extraordinary ambition. The Chinese contribution: 32 YJ-18 anti-ship cruise missiles carried in the VLS cells of CNS Urumqi and the torpedo tubes of a submerged Type 093A attack submarine, designated as part of the exercise force, but operating covertly beneath the joint formation, plus 8 YJ-12 supersonic anti-ship missiles loaded on the frigate's launch rails and concealed under exercise weather covers. The Iranian contribution: 22 Nor anti-ship missiles, Iran's domestically produced variant of the C-802, carried aboard the IRGC frigates, plus 16 Nasr-1 short-range anti-ship missiles distributed across the 4 fast patrol craft, 16 Qatar cruise missiles held at launch readiness aboard an IRGC shore battery on the Makran coast, programmed to fire on a radio signal from the task force commander. 78 weapons total, 32 from below the surface, 46 from the surface formation, 16 from the coast, all of them assigned to USS Carl Vinson and her escort vessels, all timed to arrive within a 70-second window, a saturation sequence that the joint planners had modeled as exceeding the combined intercept capacity of the strike group's Aegis systems. In Beijing and in Tehran, the operation had been given different names, but the same objective: prove that the United States Navy was not invulnerable in waters that China and Iran both claimed as their strategic sphere, sink or cripple a carrier, change the calculus, reshape the world's understanding of American power. They had made 6 catastrophic mistakes. First mistake: the Type 093A submarine had been tracked continuously for 19 days. The acoustic signature that identified it had been detected and classified by U.S. undersea surveillance assets 11 days before the joint exercise began, before the surface force ever left port. The submarine's covert positioning beneath the exercise formation, its slow-speed transit, its depth profile, and its weapons readiness indicators had all been assessed by U.S. Pacific Fleet and Fifth Fleet intelligence, with a confidence level that left no doubt about the submarine's role in what was being planned. The information had been transmitted to USS Carl Vinson's Strike Group commander 41 hours before the attack. He had adjusted his defensive posture, repositioned his escort vessels, and transmitted an alert to Indo-Pacific Command that was classified at the highest level and held in the compartmented channel that the joint Chinese-Iranian planning had not penetrated. Second mistake, the YJ-18 missiles in CNS Urumqi's VLS cells had been assessed through electronic intelligence collection, the emission signature of the VLS cell pre-launch heating sequences, a thermal management procedure that the YJ-18 requires before firing, had been detected and classified by an EP-3E Ares signals intelligence aircraft operating at altitude over the northern Arabian Sea 3 hours before the attack. The EP-3E's emissions intelligence had identified the specific pre-launch signature, transmitted the data to USS Carl Vinson's CIC, and triggered the strike group's transition from routine alert to combat readiness at 2:14 a.m., 1 hour and 53 minutes before the attack began. The strike group had not been surprised. It had been waiting. Third mistake, the Iranian shore battery on the Makran coast had been located and targeted 6 days earlier. A classified U.S. Navy surveillance asset operating in the Arabian Sea had detected the Qatar Cruise missile battery's radar emissions during its activation testing 4 days before the attack, establishing its precise position on the Makran coast. The targeting package had been built, reviewed, and preloaded into the Tomahawk cells of USS Bunker Hill, the Ticonderoga-class cruiser operating as the strike group's primary surface warfare and missile defense coordinator. Within 24 hours of detection, when the radio signal was transmitted from the Joint Task Force commander at 4:07 a.m., activating the Makran battery. The battery's position was already in USS Bunker Hill's fire control system. The 16 Qatar missiles that were supposed to approach from the coast arrived as a third attack axis. They were the third axis that USS Bunker Hill had been prepared for longest. Fourth mistake, the IRGC fast patrol craft had no answer for what was already overhead. The 4 IRGC fast patrol craft, carrying the Nasr-1 short-range anti-ship missiles that were designed to complete the saturation of USS Carl Vinson's close-in defenses after the longer-range weapons had exhausted the Aegis system, were operating on the surface in the exercise formation, fully visible on radar, tracked continuously by the E-2D Advanced Hawkeye that had been maintaining a surveillance orbit over the exercise area since the pre-launch emissions were detected at 2:14 a.m. When the attack began, the 4 fast patrol craft were not a surprise element arriving from an unexpected direction. They were pre-assigned targets whose fire missions had already been distributed to USS Carl Vinson's airborne F/A-18E Super Hornets 40 minutes before the first missile fired. Fifth mistake, the joint communications architecture between the Chinese and Iranian forces had been penetrated. The encrypted radio protocol that coordinated the timing of the joint attack, the synchronized launch sequence that required both the Chinese VLS cells, the Iranian frigates, the submerged Type 093A, and the Makran battery to fire within a specific 40-second window, had been collected and partially decrypted by NSA assets operating against the exercise communications traffic for 6 of the 11 days of the exercise. The decryption was incomplete, but sufficient to identify the execute code word and the timing protocol. When the execute code word was transmitted by the Joint Task Force commander at 4:06 a.m., 60 seconds before the first missile fired, it was received simultaneously by the Joint Force and by USS Carl Vinson's electronic warfare officer, who transmitted the final execute alert to every defensive system in the strike group in the same second. 60 seconds of additional warning. In a missile defense context, 60 seconds is the difference between an engagement sequence that is already in motion and one that is still initializing. Sixth mistake. They had modeled the strike group's defensive capacity against a two-axis attack. Their saturation mathematics, the calculation that 78 simultaneous weapons would exceed the Aegis intercept capacity, was built on a model of USS Carl Vinson's strike group as it had been constituted 18 months earlier, before the addition of USS Bunker Hill's upgraded baseline 9 Aegis system, and before the deployment of 2 additional Arleigh Burke-class destroyers with SM-6 dual-mode interceptors to the strike group's escort formation. The Aegis architecture they were attacking had 37% more intercept capacity than the architecture they had modeled. The saturation mathematics did not hold. What happened in the next 31 minutes removed 78 weapons from the battlespace and ended the naval careers of every Chinese and Iranian vessel that had participated in the attack. At 4:07 a.m., the execute code word reached the Joint Task Force and USS Carl Vinson's CIC simultaneously. The strike group commander's response had been prescripted in the defensive execution sequence that his staff had built over the previous 41 hours. It required no deliberation. The tactical action officer at USS Bunker Hill received the execute order and transmitted engagement authority to every Aegis system in the formation in 3 seconds. The Type 093A submarine launched first. Its 8 YJ-18 cruise missiles, from its torpedo tubes emerging at 4-second intervals from 200 feet below the surface and climbing to their transit altitude as they accelerated toward USS Carl Vinson. The submarine was located, classified, and engaged within 11 seconds of its first launch. 2 MH-60R Seahawk helicopters from USS Carl Vinson that had been holding at low altitude on the submarine's assessed position, placed there as part of the defensive posture adjustment, made 41 hours earlier, dropped 2 Mk-54 lightweight torpedoes. The Type 093A was neutralized before its last missile reached the surface. Its crew did not survive the engagement. CNS Urumqi fired her 32 VLS-launched YJ-18S in a compressed sequence beginning at 4:08 a.m. The destroyers USS Halsey and USS Michael Murphy, both Arleigh Burke-class vessels with baseline 9, Aegis and SM-6 interceptors in their forward VLS banks, were already in their engagement sectors when the first YJ-18 tracks appeared on their fire control displays. SM-6 launches began within 8 seconds of the first YJ-18 entering radar tracking range. The SM-6's dual-mode seeker, combining active radar homing with data link mid-course guidance, made it the optimal weapon for the YJ-18's high-altitude cruise profile. 24 YJ-18S were neutralized by SM-6 in the outer engagement layer. 8 continued inbound and were engaged by SM-2 missiles from USS Bunker Hill in the middle layer. All 8 were neutralized. The YJ-12 supersonic missiles from the Chinese frigates, 8 of them, approaching at Mach 3 in a sea-skimming profile, were engaged by the F-35Cs from USS Carl Vinson that had been holding combat air patrol stations on the attack's projected approach axis since 3:31 a.m. The F-35C's AN/APG-81 radar acquired the YJ-12S at extended range and fired AIM-120 DMRAMs in a ripple sequence. 6 YJ-12S were neutralized in the outer air engagement zone by AMRAAM. 2 survived the fighter engagement and were taken by USS Bunker Hill's SM-2 batteries at medium range. The 22 Iranian Noor missiles were engaged across 2 layers. The SM-2 batteries on USS Halsey and USS Stockdale handled the outer engagement envelope. 15 Noor missiles neutralized at ranges between 40 and 60 miles from the carrier. 7 continued inbound and entered the inner defensive layer. where they were engaged by the carrier's own ram short-range missiles and the phalanx CIWWS systems of the inner escort vessels. All 7 were neutralized. None reached USS Carl Vinson. The 16 Nasr-1 missiles from the IRGC fast patrol craft never left their launch rails. The 4 fast patrol craft were engaged by USS Carl Vinson's airborne F/A-18E Super Hornets at 4:09 a.m., 2 minutes after the attack began, and before the Nasr-1 crews could complete their firing sequences. Each Super Hornet carried 4 AGM-84 Harpoon missiles and 2 AGM-65 Maverick missiles. In 4 minutes of engagement at low altitude over the dark Arabian Sea, 4 fast patrol craft were rendered inoperable by Harpoon strikes. Their Nasr-1 missiles, still aboard, were never fired. The 16 Qatar cruise missiles from the Makran coast launched at 4:07 a.m. on their programmed trajectories toward USS Carl Vinson, 180 miles to the south. Their flight time at cruise speed, approximately 22 minutes. USS Bunker Hill had been tracking the battery's position for 6 days. She fired 14 Tomahawk cruise missiles against the battery site at 4:08 a.m., 1 minute after the Qatar missiles launched. The Tomahawks were programmed for an 11-minute flight to the battery position. At 4:19 a.m., while the Qatar missiles were still 8 minutes from USS Carl Vinson, the Tomahawks impacted the Makran battery site. The remaining launch infrastructure, the support vehicles, and the communications equipment that had transmitted the fire order were rendered inoperable in a sequence of direct impacts. The 16 Qatar missiles continued toward USS Carl Vinson without the battery's launch control guidance to update their targeting data. Their onboard navigation was sufficient to maintain their general heading, but insufficient for precision targeting against a maneuvering carrier. USS Bunker Hill's Aegis tracked all 16 from their launch point. SM-2 interceptors were fired beginning at 4:23 a.m. as the Qatar missiles approached their terminal engagement range. 14 were neutralized by SM-2. 2 survived the first intercept attempt and were taken by SM-6 in follow-on engagements. All 16 were neutralized before reaching the strike group's outer defensive perimeter. 78 weapons. 78 neutralized. USS Carl Vinson, undamaged. Every escort vessel, undamaged. 0 impacts on any U.S. Navy asset. Now the strike group answered. USS Carl Vinson had been launching strike aircraft since 4:11 a.m., 4 minutes after the attack began. In 14 minutes, 26 aircraft were airborne. 10 F/A 18E Super Hornets, 8 F-35C Lightning IIs, 4 EA-18G Growlers, 4 E-2D Advanced Hawkeyes, maintaining the airborne surveillance and control picture. The EA-18Gs activated their jamming systems at 4:19 a.m., flooding the electromagnetic spectrum used by the Chinese and Iranian vessels' fire control radars and communications systems with coordinated broadband interference. CNS Urumqi and CNS Shangtan, the Chinese naval vessels that had generated the primary anti-ship missile threat, were engaged by F-35Cs using AGM-158. You see LRASM long-range anti-ship missiles at 4:28 a.m. The LRASM is the U.S. Navy's current premier anti-ship strike weapon. Autonomous, low observable, and capable of maneuvering to defeat ship defenses. 6 LRASMs targeted CNS Urumqi. 4 targeted CNS Shangtan. CNS Urumqi sustained 4 direct hits and was assessed as non-recoverable, taking on water rapidly. Her crew abandoned the vessel at 4:47 a.m. CNS Shangtan sustained 3 hits and was left dead in the water. Her propulsion incapacitated and her weapons systems rendered inoperable. The 3 IRGC frigates were engaged by the F/A 18E Super Hornets, using AGM-84 Harpoon missiles in a coordinated time-on-target sequence. Each frigate received a 4 Harpoon salvo. All 3 IRGC frigates were rendered inoperable within a 6-minute engagement window. 2 sank within the hour. 1 remained afloat but completely incapacitated with no propulsion, no weapons capability, and progressive flooding. USS Bunker Hill fired an additional 24 Tomahawk missiles at 4:22 a.m., targeting the IRGC Naval Coordination Facility on the Makran coast that had directed the shore battery firing. A hardened building complex that contained the communications infrastructure through which the Iranian component of the joint attack had been coordinated. All 4 buildings in the complex received direct Tomahawk impacts over a 4-minute window. The complex was rendered comprehensively inoperable. The replenishment vessel RFAHU Shaganhu, the Chinese logistics ship that had sustained the joint exercise formation and that was assessed as having provided targeting and communications relay support for the attack, was engaged by 2 F/A-18E Super Hornets at 4:41 a.m. The vessel was rendered inoperable by 2 harpoon hits that destroyed her engine room and communications suite. She was left dead in the water. The full accounting, compiled by USS Carl Vinson's Strike Group Commander and transmitted to Indo-Pacific Command at 6 a.m., 78 weapons launched against USS Carl Vinson Strike Group from 4 coordinated axes, 78 neutralized, 0 impacts on any U.S. Navy vessel. USS Carl Vinson, undamaged, flight operations continuous. All escort vessels, undamaged and fully operational. U.S. personnel who sustained fatal outcomes, 0. U.S. aircraft rendered inoperable, 0. Type 093A, attack submarine, neutralized and removed from the operational area permanently. CNS Urumqi, non-recoverable, sank at 5:12 a.m. CNS Xiangtan, incapacitated, dead in the water. RFAHU Chaganhu, incapacitated, dead in the water. 3 IRGC frigates, all rendered inoperable, 2 sank. 4 IRGC fast patrol craft, all rendered inoperable. Makran Coast counter battery site, rendered inoperable. Makran Coast ERGC Naval Coordination Facility, rendered inoperable. Chinese and Iranian naval personnel across all vessels and shore installations who sustained fatal outcomes, 314. At 5:47 a.m., the first F-35C from the morning's second wave launched off USS Carl Vinson's bow catapult into the Arabian Sea dawn. The sun was coming up in the east, painting the ocean gold and orange, and in that light, the debris field from the night's engagement was visible on the surface. Oil slicks, floating wreckage. The bow section of CNS Urumqi still visible before it slipped beneath the surface. The pilot noted it on his departure routing and climbed away to the northwest on his assigned patrol station. The carrier continued northwest at 24 knots. The same heading, the same speed, the same intent. In Beijing and in Tehran, the architects of the joint operation received their damage assessments in the same hour. The combined force that had spent 19 months in coordinated planning and had positioned itself over 11 days of covered exercises had been systematically dismantled in 31 minutes. The submarine was gone. The primary surface combatants were gone or incapacitated. The shore battery was inoperable. The coordination facility was inoperable. And USS Carl Vinson was sailing northwest in the early morning sun, undamaged, her flight deck active, her air wing cycling through the standard morning rotation as if the 78 weapons that had been fired at her before dawn had been nothing more than an administrative entry in the night log. The joint operation that was supposed to reshape the world's understanding of American naval power had reshaped it, just not in the direction that Beijing and Tehran had intended. What the world now understood, what every naval planning staff from Tokyo to London to Riyadh now had to incorporate into their calculations, was that a coordinated, synchronized, multi-nation surprise attack from 4 simultaneous axes using 78 weapons of multiple types had achieved 0 impacts against a U.S. carrier strike group that had 41 hours of warning, had repositioned its defensive assets accordingly, and had been waiting with its intercept sequences already running. The Arabian Sea was free, as it had always been, as it remained. This is what happens when you coordinate a joint surprise attack against a United States carrier strike group. You do not achieve surprise. You find that your submarine has been tracked for 19 days and is neutralized within 11 seconds of its first launch. You find that your pre-launch heating sequences were detected 3 hours before you fired, that your execute code word was received simultaneously by your own forces and by the carrier's electronic warfare officer. You find that the strike group you are attacking has 37% more intercept capacity than the architecture you modeled, because it was reinforced in direct response to intelligence about your operation. You find that your shore battery is struck by Tomahawks, while your missiles are still 8 minutes from their target, and that every one of your coast-launched weapons is neutralized before it reaches the defensive perimeter. You fire 78 weapons from 4 axes. Everyone is neutralized, and the carrier you came to remove from the Arabian Sea watches your vessels sink from a flight deck that never stopped launching aircraft. 19 months of joint planning, 11 days of positioning, 31 minutes of engagement, 0 impacts. The morning watch on USS Carl Vinson logged the engagement in the standard format and transmitted the report to Indo-Pacific Command. Then they went back to work. There was a full day of flight operations ahead. The Arabian Sea required continuous coverage. The mission continued. It always does.